Thank you for the introduction and thank you for the advertisement. Very much appreciated. It was up. Is it now working? Yes. So thanks again for everyone. Thanks for the intro and thanks for the advertisement. I'm going to talk about open communication for open development. Coming from an open source background, that's why I learned it. And I noticed that in InnerSource we have the same challenges. So I can pretty much skip that. I'm a co-founder and member of the InnerSource Commons Foundation, a member of the Apache Software Foundation, member of the European Open Source Academy, and open source strategist at Europace AG, which is just down the street, 10 minutes on the other side. So if I tell you that I want to invite you to do open source, how many of you think I want you to publish all of your code? Awesome, because usually that's what people think when I talk about do more open source. Okay, hands up if you are using open source. Do I see all hands? Awesome, I see all hands. Yes, very well. Now the funny thing is, we've just seen open sources everywhere. It's also very likely a critical part of your business. Wouldn't you want to make sure that this critical part and foundation remains stable and want to have a look into what you're using there? Now that's why I want to invite you to participate in open source. Okay, when I talk to people, what they think about when I talk about participate in open source. Hands up if you think that I want you to contribute patches. Okay, everyone who has your hands up, you're 3 steps ahead. What I really want you to do is to start by reading and following along. So here's what I tell my colleagues and everyone I bump into. If you want to get started with open source, you look at all of the stuff that you're using because that's what you're invested in already. And then you check out how to follow that community. You read along. You spend maybe an hour a week just to read. By reading, what you see is how the community works, how they build, what's on their schedule, what's on their roadmap. And you will notice 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks into that exercise that you start answering questions because they are recurring. Suddenly, there's your first contribution. So you learn along the way, you start helping others, you can become part of the team. And by the way, the learning along the way, that's also learning for stuff that you can use within your enterprise because you started with what you were using already. So you learn how to better use that open source. You learn which kinds of patterns they use in order to do testing, to do continuous integration, to do quality control, to do prioritization, to do coordination in global teams that are remote first. Okay, let me play a game. You have your mobile phone with you? Good. Imagine you are Mrs. Interested Cat. You use your project. You have experience with the architecture because you're a good engineer. You have interest in keeping it alive. And you want to pull that person in as a committer. Go to this web page. So you can also go to menti.com and enter 45597544. You shouldn't be a presenter. Yes. Now you enter, imagine you're that Miss Imaginary Cat. What do you need to get started? You want to start contributing to Airflow, to Superset, to Tomcat, maybe even to HTTPD. What do you need? Lots of good things there. And those who have done open source before, you can think about your journey. I see documentation there in the middle. We all know that we need it. When we look even in open source, how good is documentation? Good first patch, maybe? Okay, I'll break that here. This is how you're getting started for any open source project. You look for the website, you will find the links that says community. You check where does it discuss. At the Apache Software Foundation, it's often mailing lists, sometimes it's Slack, sometimes it's Discord or whatever your cool kids are using. You will find stuff for developers and for users. You will find the community in a semi-structured chat group. And essentially what you do find is a contact point for users, for developers, an issue tracker where you can leave all your issues, a quick chat for quick questions, and sometimes even office hours for meetings. So you have clear paths for asking questions, for fixing documentation, proposing small changes and large changes, because often those paths have to differ. So the side effect of this public communication is what Denise mentioned earlier today. It is written down, it is archived, like all of the Apache mailing lists are being archived for decades. You can go back all the way to the 90s, you will find the discussions there. It is searchable, so you remember, wait a minute, I answered that user question yesterday. You search for it and you link to it. And it's linkable, and by that it's persistent. Does that mean you get less questions? Nope. You get the same amount of questions, but you get faster at answering them because you can reference them back. And anyone watching you can do the same and help you answering. And that's how you pull the people in. That also doesn't mean that you're remote only. It means you're remote first. Everywhere I travel, there's an Apache mailing list, which is party@apache.org, where you can post your coordinates, and you can say, want to have a cup of tea this afternoon. And very likely people will be there and will meet with you. I was in Ireland 2 weeks ago, and I posted a similar question to people I know in Ireland. I had no idea that the people I was meeting over not a cup of tea, over going to the zoo and having a hot chocolate, came 267 kilometers one way and back. That is the level of investment you have in personal relationships. That is something that you may not have in your company, where sometimes even having people on 2 floors separates them. So one of the tasks that you will have as an InnerSource practitioner is getting people to drink tea together. And even if that means bringing cookies to the office. Okay, so your goal is to turn users into contributors, into committers. By the way, for each 100 users, you will have 1 contributor. For each 100 contributors, you will have 1 committer. That is roughly the percentages. That translates to pulling people who are using your project into your team. So that's what we had with Mercedes earlier today, where it worked really, really well when people use the software themselves on a daily basis to pull them in. Essentially, that is based on what is generally called informed self-interest. They themselves have an issue that they have to solve, and that's what gets them active. So in InnerSource, it's much easier, right? We're all working for the same company towards the same goals. Okay, imagine you're Mr. Curious Cat. You depend on an InnerSource project. They are in a different team, and you want to finding common meeting times is utterly difficult. Same game as before. You still have the page open, don't you? What does Mr. Curious Cat need in order to get started? Come on, they also need the same stuff that the open source people need. It's not a trick question. You're getting ahead of me here. I still want to see documentation very high up. But that means that I can skip one more slide. Very nice of you. So essentially it means, again, turning contributors into committers, pulling them into your project, invoking that informed self-interest. And the tricky part is what you just shared. I will skip that. You already shared a lot of the tripwires, so I will not make you type that up again. Where does everyday communication and coordination happen? Does it happen at the same desk, where your contributor cannot listen in? At Apache, they are globally distributed. What didn't happen on the mailing list didn't happen. That is for the reasons that everyone who wants to contribute can watch over your shoulder. You remember that uncomfortable feeling sitting in school, teacher behind you while you were writing a test? That is the feeling that you need. They watch you in order to get started. Where does planning and roadmap setting happen? Is that something that is visible for contributors, or is that something that happens in the meeting room? Contributors need to know that so that they don't work on stuff that is out of scope. Where does user experience design happen? How does your contributor know whether the customers are in focus? You already know I love going to the zoo, even in Ireland, but I hate having a zoo of disconnected shoes. What you want to do is to think about archiving conversations long term. And long term meaning for the entire life cycle of the product that you're talking about. So no quickly switching tools and forgetting the history. And how many of you once bumped into a feature where you were like, is it something I can throw away? Is it art, or what is it for? I see a lot of smiling, nodding faces. Just nobody daring to raise their hand. Think about integrated search. In companies, we usually have different tools for issue tracking, for Wiki, and depending on team, you have a different tool. You want to integrate that together and hide it behind one search bar. Open source has that. That search bar is a public search engine. You don't want to have that. You have to build it internally. You have to think about linkability. As I mentioned before, if a question comes up again, you want to link to the answer and not type it up again. And unfortunately, you have to think about permission handling. So who gets access to this project? We had that with Bosch earlier today. Does that have any impact on line management? So with open source, I can at least point to my manager and tell them, look, this is publicly visible, you can see it as well. If it's inside the corporation, potentially not, this is going to be interesting. And there's another question. I'm talking about communicating openly, visibly for everyone. How safe do your colleagues feel sharing, communicating openly, making mistakes, asking what they may consider dumb questions where no dumb questions exist? Work outside of their team, outside of their comfort zone, with highly visible communication. So there is a certain company culture working against you. Remember the example from 2 different floors? We all know that this already drives teams apart. How about how about people that are not in the same team, potentially remote first? That is a level up in terms of trust building, in terms of communication, but also in terms of management. So what you need to make is time for relationship building. We may be remote first, but what we do is we schedule work meetings. When we were in the office and not in a distributed team, relationship building happens accidentally, incidentally, at the coffee machine, drinking a cup of tea, going out for lunch together. with remote teams, distributed teams, this doesn't happen automatically. How does it feel to schedule half an hour for a virtual cup of tea? Is that okay, or is that something that is encouraged? Then we heard a lot about metrics. And we heard about works councils being in the way. They're in the way for a certain reason. Metrics are scary. Metrics sometimes can be used in order to judge people. So it's vital, if you roll out metrics, to pull the workforce in and to make sure that you are not measuring something that could be used as a negative. So with that, I would like to conclude that open source and InnerSource are not that far from each other. However, it goes way beyond code. You have to start a lot earlier. Sorry. The funny thing is that openness is vital, and not only for us engineers. So what I've seen in the wild is, at some point, it starts working at the engineering level. That is usually the point where small modifications just make it into the code base. They are smoothless. As soon as you want to make larger modifications, trouble starts to pop up, because larger modifications take time, and you only get time if you talk to your manager, to your product owner, whatever. So these people also need to be in the loop. What we've done at my employer is to have InnerSource training, not only for the engineers, but for everyone. And you can access this training at the InnerSource Commons. There is a learning path. It's for trusted contributors, for contributors. There's an introduction, but there's also for people that are not directly working on GitHub, GitLab, whatever you use internally. And the funny thing about the InnerSource Commons Foundation is you don't have to work on these materials internally alone, but there's people from Bosch, there's people from SAP, there's people all around the room who can work together with you on these trainings and on that material. And that is essentially the core of the InnerSource concept and open source concept. So essentially, there's more layers than you may expect, and it needs trust and safety to be effective. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.